Right, hello Year 4. So Mrs. Smith has asked me, Mrs. Edwards even, has asked me to demonstrate the digestive process for you, and to that end, unfortunately you can't be in school to see it in person, but we're going to do it in the school for you to see on video. So, as you would have been taught, the digestive process starts in the mouth. So we're going to start in the mouth, but before we start digesting, obviously we've got to start eating. So we're going to have a little bit of a breakfast. It's not necessarily going to be the most nutritious breakfast you're going to be having, but we're going to have some muesli. So we've started off well, a little bit of muesli, a little bit more, super. So we've put a bowl full of muesli, and then into this, we're also going to have some banana. So we're going to have a little bit of banana, chopped up. Probably about enough. Feeling still a little bit peckish, so chuck a little bit of chocolate in. And just to wash it all down, we'll have a little bit of coffee as well. So whilst that's now in our mouth, hopefully we couldn't have put it quite such quantities or quite such a mixture in at a time. Now if you remember, there's two forms of digestion going in your mouth. There's mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. We'll start with the mechanical because it's very simple. It's your teeth essentially. They're slicing, dicing and crushing, and for the teeth we're going to use my potato masher, and we're going to be crushing. This is called mastication, and it is a vital part of the digestive process, one which I know you guys often overlook as you're chucking food back and swallowing it whole, but without it you're putting the rest of the digestive process under strain because you're not actually getting enough, you're not starting the process off early enough, which means everything else is playing catch up. But anyway, that's the start of the mastication, that's the mechanical digestion. Now remember, I'm going to quickly top this up. There are two forms of digestion in the mouth. There's the mechanical digestion, and then there's the chemical digestion. Now the chemical digestion involves the release of an enzyme called amylase. Amylase is the enzyme. An enzyme essentially breaks down things. Wherever you've got enzymes all through your digestive system, and they break down things. They break down food, fats, all sorts of things. They are crucial in it. The amylase is found, unsurprisingly, in your saliva. And your saliva does a couple of things. First, it lubricates the mouth, but also it contains the amylase, which starts that process of breaking down the food. So that's going to be mixing in with the food. You continue the mechanical digestion by crushing it up, and that's now the mouth done. So after the mouth, you swallow. Now, if we'd been in class, I'd have had one of you do a headstand, and I'd have had you be drinking something upside down to show. But essentially your esophagus, although slightly smaller than this, is quite simply a tube from the mouth to the stomach, which we're going to get to in a moment. Now the esophagus works by contracting and pushing, forcing the food all the way down from the mouth to the stomach, not just on gravity. So what I was going to show you in class was even if you're upside down, it would still work. This is called peristalsis. We're going to use this label a couple of times in here. Peristalsis is any time basically one of the organs in your digestive system is contracting and squeezing, and that happens a few times, and we'll come back to it in a moment. But essentially, I'm not going to tip it down because that would end up very badly, but essentially the food goes from the mouth down through the esophagus and into the stomach. Now, the stomach, when it's not expanded, is really only about this size. So it's quite a small thing, but you'll notice on this, essentially it's muscle. It's covered, the walls of the stomach are all muscle. And that is the reason for that is what we're going to look at in a moment. Right, so let me just transfer somewhat carefully without the benefit of having an assistant. The food from the mouth via the esophagus and into the stomach. That will just have to do. So, the food has now arrived in the stomach. Now in the stomach, once again, there are two forms of digestion. There's chemical digestion and mechanical digestion. This time we're going to start with the chemical digestion. The chemical digestion involves things called your gastric juices. Your gastric juices are made up of two main parts. You've got hydrochloric acid and you've got pepsin. Hydrochloric acid is the sort of thing which dissolves everything. People, skin, bones, the whole kit and caboodle. It's a very, very powerful acid. Breaks down pretty much everything. Pepsin, once again, is much more of an enzyme, and that also starts to break things down in a very different way to acids. If you're in class, probably the first thing you'd be asking is, why, if we've got hydrochloric acid in our stomach and it burns through everything, Mr. Wiseman, does it not burn through our stomachs and ends up leaving a great big pool on the floor? Well, the answer to that is that our stomach is quite clever and has this mucus lining on the inside, which does not get broken down by hydrochloric acid, which means that the hydrochloric acid stays in the stomach and helps the digestive process. So here are our gastric juices, or here's some of our gastric juices, and that goes into the stomach, which is here, and now this next phase happens. So the peristalsis, the mechanical digestion here, once again involves peristalsis, which is the contraction of the stomach muscle. And the stomach basically starts to squeeze and mix and squash and break down even further the food that's been swallowed, and so it's not only mixing with the stomach juices, this action is also causing it to break down further. So anyway, that's the stomach. Now we're paused for a second because we're about to enter the small intestine. Now the small intestine, as you would have seen, it's called the small intestine because it's very thin. It is, however, very long. On an adult, between 7 and 9 meters long, so it's exceptionally long. However, before it goes into the small intestine, there's a couple of things I want to talk about, only very briefly, because we've got the pancreas. Now, the pancreas sits just at the top of the small intestine, and it does a couple of things. Firstly, it neutralises the acid to make sure that the stomach acid isn't going into our small intestine and causing us problems there. And the second thing is it also releases more enzymes, things to break down the food inside the small intestine. Next, you've got the gallbladder. This creates bile, produces bile. Once again, this is another yellow, orangey substance, which I've actually done here, although it's pretty red as opposed to yellow and orange. And that gets produced by the liver and stored in the gallbladder. So next we go to our small intestine. In the absence of a 7 meter long tight, which I didn't bring in, because A, I don't own, and B, I forgot the full length of tights to bring in. I've just got what I think is called a pop sock, as I've just been informed. But nevertheless, regardless of the length of it, I really want to look at the operation of it. So the food travels from the stomach into the small intestine. Now, carefully going to just push this into the small intestine and then just take it out of the stomach and through into the small intestine. Now what you'll see straight away is that the walls of the tights essentially allow the fluid to start to seep out. Now this is the start of the absorption process. Remember, the whole purpose of the digestive system is to take the nutrients out of the food, the minerals, the vitamins, the proteins, all the building, everything that's in the reason we're eating the food needs to be absorbed into the body. Now this does to a degree start in the mouth, but the main place of this absorption occurring is in the small intestine. Now you hopefully would have looked at the villi, these billions of little fingers that are on the inside of your small intestine, which essentially increase the surface area of your small intestine so that it absorbs all the goodness. Now, if we were to stretch the small intestine out, including the villi, the whole surface area, it would cover around about 2 football pitches. The thickness of it is about half that of a human hair. So the surface area involved in the small intestine is absolutely extraordinary. And what it's doing, as you can see, is absorbing the goodness out of it. So as it travels through the small intestine, it It takes all the nutrients out, it takes all the minerals out, all the vitamins, everything that we're absorbing from it, it takes it out. And then eventually it ends up travelling into the large intestine. Now the large intestine is the great big large sausage shaped thing that essentially fits around the top of your stomach and small intestine. And as it lands in your large intestine, it goes into your large intestine, it's still, as you can see, very, very wet. And I mean, your large intestine has a number of functions, but one of its main functions is to absorb the moisture and the water from your food. So to represent that, we're going to use a towel to essentially squeeze out the water, which is what would happen as it travels down through the large intestine. Once again, though, this process from the large intestine is having a lot of effects on the body. It's where a lot of anti-immuno factors are formed, and where it absorbs fibre and various other things. So it's a very important step within the process. I need a spoon because this is not quite this. And then we come out the end of the large intestine. I'm going to mention the appendix here because some of you might have had your appendix removed. The appendix is at the other end of the large intestine. It is a pretty useless filter, however, albeit useless, if it goes wrong and gets blocked and gets infected, it can cause something called appendicitis, and that can be exceptionally painful, potentially very dangerous, and often has to have results in an operation. I'm sure that some of you might have had that. So now we come to the end. Well, we're not quite the end. We now come to the anus, the bottom, the final part of the journey from the food, from the mouth. And essentially the anus, to all intents and purposes, is a bag. It's a bag which fills up with poo or fills up with the waste product until such time as you decide you can no longer have that bag as full as it is. And so so the bag essentially stores the poo in the anus until such time as you decide to empty the bag. When you empty the bag, fortunately you don't have to snip the bag. Your anus opens via the sphincter and out, and hopefully not quite as wet and as consistency as this, plops your poo. So that is the end of the digestive process. It is also why it is pretty important to see what comes out at the end of the digestive process, because the end product pretty much determines how healthy everything's going on, and your digestive system is at the heart of your body. If your digestive system is not working well, or not functioning, or not absorbing what you need it to do, it's a pretty good indicator that your lifestyle is not quite right in terms of you're not eating the right things, not doing enough exercise, or not getting enough sleep. It's a good indicator. Anyway, I hope you get on and do this yourself at home, and I cannot wait to see the videos that you share with Mrs. Layden and Mrs. Edwards. Thank you very much.